Start our recording. So hi everybody and welcome to our November 17th webinar. We're going to be talking today about group dynamics and conflict management. And this is a part of our ongoing organizing curriculum that we have been hosting for the last 6 months, where we really have been sharing skills and techniques for our leaders within PWN as we come together and learn from each other. So this is a collaborative effort. So hopefully everyone will have access to chat and can go ahead and just share your thoughts and any comments that you have in the chat box. We also are live streaming on Facebook. And so if you do not want to be on Facebook, you can go ahead and turn your camera off or change your name. It is absolutely okay. We're just glad that you're here with us today. So as we talk about our group dynamics and our conflict management, just want to cover a few logistics. Our meeting is being recorded as well as streamed on Facebook Live. We are in meeting mode on Zoom. So if you can mute yourself, that's great. If we get a lot of background noise, we'll go ahead and just mute you. If you have been muted, you can do *6 to unmute yourself if you have a question, because as we said, we have quite a few places in here where we're going to be having an honest conversation. So appreciate everybody joining. Feel free to ask questions or make comments in the chat box throughout. That's always really helpful. Some of the presenters can't actually see that because they do turn their chat off. If you're like I am, it gets a little distracting and I forget what I'm talking about and instead just read what people have written, which is not always helpful when you're a presenter. And then if people want to just go ahead and take a moment and introduce yourself, names, pronouns, if you will, and your location in the chat box, that would be great. Looks like we're getting a few more people joining us, and so welcome everybody. We're really glad you're here and appreciate you joining us. Our presenters today, we have an amazing cast of, the usual suspects. Actually, we have some amazing PWN leaders who have joined us today to be able to share both their thoughts as well as personal stories. So really appreciate both Alicia Diggs, Kamaria Laffrey, as well as Pat Niglior for joining us. When each of you go ahead and talk about your particular part, if you want to do a little bit more of an introduction, please feel free to do so. But we do have their titles and pronouns that are listed here. So thank you everybody for being here. Our group agreements, and we'll talk about why group agreements are so important in a little bit. But just want to go ahead and start off with our group agreements for this conversation today. We're asking everyone to speak from your personal experience and allow others to speak from theirs. We want to listen deeply. We want to take space and make space. And what that means is if you are sharing a whole bunch because this topic really resonates with you, it is a good idea to also step back and give somebody else an opportunity to talk and to share as well. So thank you all for doing that. Have fun. This is a conversation that can get intense, can feel really important. It is really important. And at the same time, we want to make sure that when we're having fun and we're talking, that we're not making fun of other people, that this is about a collective learning opportunity. And so we want to make sure that people feel like they're included in the conversation. Honor your needs and boundaries along with those of our group. So if, for example, you need to step away and eat because you've had a heck of a day, please do so. You can go ahead and turn your camera off. I actually just feel like I'm having dinner with you if you eat with your camera on. So it's not actually any problem, but please make sure that you take care of what you need to do for you. Finally, we want to talk about confidentiality and make sure that what we say here isn't shared on social media, isn't shared in other groups, certainly isn't taken out of context, because we want to make sure that people feel comfortable sharing what their thoughts are. And also asking questions. This is a learning space, as we say. So feel free to ask a question or to clarify if that's helpful. Are there other group agreements that people would like to add at this time? All right, sounds like we've got a pretty good list. So we're going to go ahead and just leave it at that. But as we go along, if there is something that people are noticing that you would like to add to the group agreements, please feel free to bring it up because we are a leaderful group and we want to make sure that we are really talking in ways so that everybody can be present and participate and feel comfortable in. So those are our group agreements. So today, really want to just sort of say that when we're talking about group dynamics, we're talking about a bunch of different things. We're talking about how I show up in a group. We're talking about how the group is run and managed. We talk about how we welcome new members in. We talk about all of that. And what's really important is to remember that what is really clear to me is not going to be clear to someone else. And so when we think about this quote, and I love it because it talks about differences. So we all have differences. Not talking about these differences is not acceptable. Silence is not an approach that works. It is the conversations that really matter. So when we come together, really when we're talking about who is participating and who shares their thoughts, we want to make sure that we find ways where we can go ahead and include everyone's perspective so that we can hear everyone so that everybody feels like they're a part of a group. And to be clear, these talking points work for any group you're in. And Kamari and I were laughing today because we were talking over groups and we said, so this works for PWN chapters and it works for our national membership call and it works for staff meetings and it works for when we're in person and at the summit. And it also works for family for next week. So some of these points might actually be some things that you hold on to for when you're in a group with your family or when you're hanging out with your siblings, or other family members. Talking about it, being really clear, asking for what you need. All of these things we're going to talk about, and they're all really important as we come and participate in groups. So our goals for today are that by the end of the training, you'll be able to understand basic group dynamics. We will also be able to identify techniques that treat members of these groups with respect, that we're able to share time, and we'll identify when personal interactions are impacting the group. We will identify opportunities for engagement, hearing all points of view and making collaborative decisions. So rather than just simply talking about something, hearing from a few people and having a vote, we're going to talk about a couple of other models that really encourage participation. We're going to talk about managing difficult interactions and to think about how we can enable members to remain a part of the group and resolve conflict when differences do arise. We're going to practice self-management. And self-management is really nothing more than just how do I show up? What do I need to feel like I can contribute and be a part of the group so that I'm seen? And what do I need to ask myself as I'm in this group and ask myself about how I'm acting in the group as well. So practice self-management techniques to support yourself and support others. So those are our goals and our outcomes. How are we going to get there? Well, we have a couple of topics that we're going to talk about, and my co-presenters are going to be able to help us as we go through. So our agenda today is we're going to talk about group dynamics, what they are, how you define them, what they mean. Then we're going to talk about conflict and conflict management. Yeah, I see Olga saying thanks that she's going to need this next week. I think a lot of us are kind of anticipating having some perhaps challenging conversations with family, and these are absolutely skills that work. They also work with any other groups, with children, with churches. They're actually pretty universal. It's about just having really good communication, which is our next step that we're going to talk about is communications. We're going to talk about agreements for groups. We're going to talk about calling in versus calling out. A lot of times we get really upset and it's super easy to just kind of blast somebody. And we really need to think about when we do that, if that is the most effective strategy. Because because when people are called out and blasted, they tend to step away from groups. And if you think about why we have groups, we want to make sure that we talk about why people would want to stay in groups or would feel included and meaningfully involved in groups. Finally, we're going to talk about techniques to participate in groups. And again, as we said, that's the self-management piece. How do I show up? And talk about supporting others within these groups, because it's not just enough to simply show up and say, well, I'm here, but it is also important, especially as we grow leadership, to think about how other people are here. So, sound good? All right. It's a packed agenda like always, but we're going to just keep going through. And if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and just ask them in the chat box. We have a couple of breaks and we'll just go ahead and address them then. All right, so the biggest, again, like our biggest definition for tonight is what is a group? A group can be just a combination of people. It can be any number of people. A group can be 2 people, a group can be 20 people. So a group doesn't have a specific number. And these people come together really to interact and engage and identify with each other at regular times or regular places. And that is important, because when we think about groups and we think about our chapters, for example, having regular chapter meetings is really important. And having a set common place that we meet is really important, because it starts building this expectation about how we can participate. And most importantly, what a group has is that they have shared beliefs, principles, and standards about the areas of common interest and how they can come together to work on tasks with agreed upon purposes and outcomes. So a group, can just be a bunch of people, but really when groups are effective, what they are is that they share beliefs and interests and they have a common goal. And that, when we think about PWN, is part of the reason why we're so powerful, is that we have this common goal about ensuring that we have the voices of women living with HIV elevated in all of the spaces that we're at. And that is a common goal. And we share our beliefs and our interests in many, many places about how we do that. So really, a group is important because it works to develop trust. And as we develop trust, then we can start moving a little bit faster. Groups, when they first form, take a lot of time to come up with group agreements and what an agenda is. And as we practice our skills and as we show up and as we develop trust, that I can show up and be invited to participate in a way that's meaningful, that my voice will be heard, and that I will be able to go ahead and just really, really participate. That's important. That is important. I'm going to just take a moment here and let's see. Hey, Aisha, I'm going to put an email in. One of our presenters is having a hard time signing on. And can you send her the direct information? Oops, sorry, I sent it to everybody there. So Pat Migliore is one of our presenters, and we just want to make sure that she can be on, because groups stop when they realize that somebody's missing and make sure that they can join. So we'll go ahead and get that to Pat. And yes, indeed, we'll go ahead and I'll continue on. So one of the problems about groups is that when we come to a group and we're really excited to participate, is that when a group either becomes really personal or doesn't feel like it is respecting how we show up or respecting our perspective, certainly doesn't have clear leadership. A lot of the things we'll talk about later, when these don't happen, it's problematic, because then the group doesn't work. People don't want to join. They don't want to be a part of the group. They don't want to they don't want to work with people. And that is something that stops our process. And so when we're thinking about advocacy and we think about how we show up as advocates, it is so important for us to be in groups and able to communicate and able to build on our leadership rather than tearing down and diffusing the energy. It sort of feels to me, when I talk about group dynamics, I talk about a stream. right? And if we have a stream that's going along, each of us is this remarkable little drop of water. And we're in the stream and we're rushing down the stream together. And the force of water is so powerful. However, if we start putting boulders and little places that diverge off the path, then our effective force is displaced. And we're not as effective anymore. And that power of that rushing water is no longer really present. And so when we think about how do we do that, that to me is really when we think about groups, how we can go ahead and make sure that we are positive around our group interactions and identify when there's a challenge, because, groups are groups are their own kind of organism, and groups have challenges, but the best way to deal with it is to talk about it, to identify it and talk about it, so that we can really go ahead and move forward. So that's the important part. So at the end of the, webinar tonight, we'll all stand up and we'll just do our whoosh so that we can all be part of that stream together. I know you're all going to look at the streams very differently from now on, and I apologize, but only slightly. So that's what a group is. So when we talk about it, and we talk about how it feels to be in a group that works and how it feels to be in a group that doesn't work, would love to get a little bit of interaction from our audience. We have a remarkable 29 people who've joined. Hello, folks. And so if you either want to type it in the chat box, we can go ahead and just read it out. Or if you want to come off of mute, we are in meeting mode, so we can go ahead and really have this be interactive. So who wants to give me 1 or 2 points? How does it feel when you're in a group that works? And we've got, it works, it's empowering, mutual respect and trust, all of that. Those are all great. And thank you, Kamaria and Tammy, for those. Anyone else want to share some ideas about what it's like when groups work? Happy fun. Everyone has a voice. Yeah, exactly. Olga, I think if you're talking, you're on mute, sweetie.
Okay, can you hear me
there
now?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Yes, being in a group that works, you feel accomplished, you feel empowered, you feel valued. You also enjoy the work you're doing, no matter how hard it is. You enjoy it. It doesn't seem like work. And when you're in a group that doesn't work, you feel like you're just wasting time. You get burned out. You don't want to show up. It feels like and you feel degrading.
Yeah. So it sounds like being respected is super important. Having your voice heard is important, right? And degrading, yeah, that's a powerful way to talk about being in a group when it's not really working well, right? Everyone knows that she's a second. All right. Any other thoughts? Anyone else want to come off of mute and talk about how they feel when they're in a group that works?
This is Tammy Ross. When I'm in a group, I feel amazing that I comfort something being in a group by listening at others, and it helps me to go through the things that I'm going through. Being in a group that no one wants to speak or talk or have anything to say, it's just like we are not accomplishing anything, and we're still stuck where we was at. So I think group is very important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're getting a lot of really great comments. Validated, lifted up, larger than myself, productive. All of that is so great about being in a group that works, connected. Absolutely. I always feel like when I'm in a group that really is working, that I can accomplish so many amazing things. And absolutely look forward to being, I look forward to actually being in a group that works. Anybody else look forward to being in a group that works? Because I also know that we'll share the burden, right? When we're starting to divvy out the tasks, it's not going to be that I have to do it all, but instead that I can, you know, help other people accomplish what they want to, and they can help me. So it feels like we can do so much. Yeah, Michelle, you've got your hand raised. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Just that when a group really works, you and your peers feel as one. And if you no question is a stupid question, it's a question that you possibly all can learn from. So that's when you got a really good group that works, then everybody can find something that they can connect on together.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Thanks, Michelle. And Kamari, you had something you wanted to add.
Just thinking about how it feels also, like when you're in that group that's working, other people are seeing that, and that has an impact, and that can inspire others to be like, okay, if they can make this happen and they can accomplish this, and this group works, how can I model what they're doing for whatever the thing is that I want to have a group for? So I think that's important to also acknowledge, like, while it feels great, like you're also inspiring others.
That is absolutely correct. Absolutely. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer because we're talking about how people feel. But yes, indeed. And I'm seeing a lot of people kind of raising, you know, nodding along and adding reactions. I'm just going to add a heart reaction because I love all of this. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Anyone else have anything else that they want to add about what it feels like to be in a group that works?
I have, this is Naima from Cleveland.
Hi, Naima, welcome.
Hi. So I think too that for me, sometimes it depends on the group, because Orion White, for example, to me is a different dynamic. And sometimes when you see the work that you all have done as a group, and sometimes you have to agree to disagree, but I guess the goal is to make sure that people who are eligible for services get the services that they need, even if it may be sharing your opinion, maybe agreeing to disagree, but the ultimate goal and the things that you accomplish makes it worthwhile. Maybe not the journey, but the outcome, if you could say it like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we go with maybe perhaps some of the intermediate steps might be something that everybody doesn't agree on, but you can talk about your common goal, which is, you know, making sure that there are services that are provided for people. And so that is certainly something that planning councils, when they come together, often do. So then let's go ahead and turn it around and think about, what does it feel like to be in a group that doesn't work? We definitely got some where being in a group that doesn't work feels stressed, drained, irritated. Oh, yes, indeed. Feels destructive, feels like people are silenced. All of this is from the chat. Thank you all so much for really adding some great points. Discouraging, yeah, sure thing. Michelle, did you want to come off of mute and add something to what it feels like to be in a group that doesn't work?
Yeah, they'll start to lose members, and that'll be detrimental to the group, because even though people don't always agree with what the next person is saying, everybody still has good ideas and good thoughts. But a group that's not working, you'll start to lose members.
Yep. Exactly. That is absolutely true. And I love, you know, Pat, ever you know, profound with her words. It feels icky for me when I have a group that I am not really looking forward to going to the meeting. I know for a fact that there's something kind of that's either going on with how I'm showing up in the group or something that's going up with the group because I don't want to be there. And oftentimes when I have to be there, then I get cranky, which is not a great way to show up in groups either. So that's just a hint to everybody. Showing up and being cranky in groups, not productive. I don't think we call it out specifically on a slide, but we'll just give you that hint. So anything else that people want to add about what it feels like to be in a group that doesn't work? All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for all those great suggestions. So this is why when we talk about groups, we want to be groups that people want to join or that they feel like their time is honored, that they're encouraged, that they're lifted up, that they're a part of this broader piece. And we want to avoid having groups that are frustrating and defeating and feel like they ignore people or minimize them, for sure. So hopefully by the time we're done with our webinar today, we will have a chance to sort of talk about our groups. So let's go ahead and think about losing my, oh, there it is. All right, so let's think about what we can accomplish in groups. So again, when we talk about why groups form and why they're important, common goals, shared understanding, that's also important. What we can accomplish in groups is, again, as we said, we can share skills and knowledge, we can build trust, we can socialize. Definitely PWN groups are some of the funnest groups to hang out with because there's the business part and then there's the socializing part, and they're both really important because we know that without sort of lifting each other up collectively, that this work is just too hard, that it wears us down, that we feel disempowered. And so by lifting each other up, we really make sure that the groups work and that we all feel really a part of it. So groups broaden ideas and solutions. I might have one really great idea, but I know if I'm in a group with 8 other people, that they'll have 8 other really remarkable solutions as well. And I want to hear them and know how they're going forward and what they can include. We share resources, so car rides together, documents that we have found, outlines that we've shared, slides from presentations that we've given. All of that are resources, and it's beyond just sort of money that we can share and help our other fellow advocates as we come together. We can challenge assumptions, both within the group as well as externally. And that is very important when we do our advocacy. We can give and receive feedback. This is something that people oftentimes are really avoidant about. Giving feedback is something that people feel like they're being too critical. Any feedback can be really powerful and can help somebody learn both what they've done really well and what they need to improve upon. The challenge with feedback is when it gets to be personal. And when it's personal, then it's not something that people learn from very well. And so we can give feedback without hurting folks. Then we want to see problems from different perspectives. And most importantly for PWN, what we can accomplish in groups is that we can mobilize. When we think about the work that we've been able to do both with our chapters as well as our summits and our IVE, our integrated voter engagement work, the amount of mobilization that we've been able to do in HIV spaces is profound and continues to set PWN up as the subject matter expert. Everyone here is a subject matter expert on being in a group and HIV advocacy. So when we talk about group dynamics, again, as we mentioned, we talk about good groups or groups that we feel like really that work, and we talk about groups that don't work. And what I actually typed all this out on the slide, and people can have access to these slides afterwards for sure. But I wanted to go ahead and say really just very, very clearly what breaks a group down or what makes a group not work is unclear leadership. So people don't know who's the facilitator, who's developing the agenda. Gets frustrating for people because they don't know when the meeting is or what the call-in information is. Excessive disagreements. You know, there is all the time to disagree about issues and substantive matters. So are we going to endorse this ballot issue or that ballot issue? Are we going to work on this issue, you know, this sexual health and reproductive justice bill, or are we going to instead work on, you know, the fair fight for $15 an hour for minimum wage? Those are good conversations, and we really need to have those discussions. But when it gets personal, or when it's just being, you know, when somebody's like, well, you say yes, so I'm going to say no every single time, that's not productive. So we talk about productive and what's useful. Blocking discussions or decisions when people are just like, well, I'm just not going to talk about it. That doesn't actually really help us within our groups. There's something called groupthink, which is really interesting, and it actually dates back to it's political science. And groupthink is when you have a whole bunch of really brilliant people, like everybody on this call, who comes together, and we are so interested in being collaborative and being a part of the group and making sure that we're all in agreement and that we get along, that we forget that we also have this responsibility when we're in groups to stand up and say, that's not okay, I don't agree, funding that particular organization is out of alignment with what we've already agreed to. That kind of disagreement is important. So desiring a consensus, meaning everybody agrees and it's all good, sometimes can be really problematic and can cause problems with the groups. We want to make sure that we don't let other people do the work, that we share the work, because we absolutely need all of us to be able to accomplish what we're hoping to do. That we share ownership. So if we work on something as a group, that is not mine to claim, but instead is something that we all talk about doing, and that we celebrate everything that everybody has done. And again, we talk about evaluation apprehension, and evaluation apprehension is the willingness to get really constructive feedback so that we can come back and do better next time. And that is important. So then when we talk about what strengthens a group, so this is the counter, and this is what helps a group work well. And that is understanding what your leadership style is. And it was pretty interesting on our last leadership style webinar. Everybody was participatory and democratic. And we know that that's probably not the case, that that's how we often think we need to show up, but that we all have our different leadership styles. And the best part is when you can find a group that needs your particular style, that helps them make decisions in a particular way. So for example, I tend to be fairly autocratic, not, you know, when it comes to my decision making. And so it means that if we need to decide on what we're going to do for lunch, that absolutely I am that person who can get us lunch ordered quickly, and instead of trying to negotiate with everybody. Now, in some places, that's not the best leadership, or I'm not the best leader for a role, and we have lots of other people, and that's why it's so important to build leadership. So understand your leadership style. Understand the best ways to communicate. For some people, emails are not good. They prefer to have text or an in-person conversation. Sometimes people, when they're driving, get really stressed, and talking to them about challenges, it's not a good time to do that, because we don't want people driving off the road. So know how people communicate, when's a good time to talk to them. Ask people, is now a good time for us to talk about this? Because if it's not, then, and you keep pushing forward because you need to talk, it's not going to be really a good way to have that conversation. And so we talk about knowing your team. How do you all fit together? Who has what piece? That's what we love, is being able to say, okay, for sure, we've got this person who's going to do that piece, and that person's going to do that. And it just really works if we all know what we're going to be doing, because then we can accomplish so much more. We want to make sure we define our roles and responsibilities. So in chapters, we have co-chairs. We have outreach coordinators if your chapter's decided to do that. We have people who recruit with specific populations because they're groups that they have, we have specific groups that people fit into, that they've got connections that I will never have. So as Sonia said, you know, knowing who fits where, definitely a key, because then everybody plays to their strengths and feels really successful, and that is important. And then finally, we want to pay attention to how people are doing, how they're interacting. So if you're in person, pay attention to somebody's body language. If you're on Zoom and somebody, you know, has their camera on and then all of a sudden just clicks it off and doesn't come back on or hangs up, it's important to check in and make sure that they're okay. It might just be that they need to go eat something or take care of themselves, but it also could be that they just had a little bit of a challenge or were feeling pinched, you know, so pinched meaning that they, you know, had something that didn't feel quite right. And following up and asking how they're doing is really a powerful way to show that you notice them, that you're paying attention, that you are willing to support them as a leader. All of that is so important when we think about really how we come to these groups. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pat. Pat, are you able to come off of mute and talk to us about the next couple of slides?
Can we go to the slides, please?
Yep, there we go.
Are you sharing them?
Oh, yes, yeah, can you see the slides, anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, so Pat, it might be that
Okay.
are you on your phone?
Yeah, I just got it. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay,
Thanks,
sorry.
Barb. Nope, got it now. You know how technophobic I can be. So, hi everybody. This is Pat Migliore, and I go by she, her, or hey you, and I am based in Seattle, Washington. And we're going to talk a little bit about conflict in groups and why some conflict happens. And so there are different types of conflict. So task-based conflict would be people who conflict with the idea that they are doing maybe too many tasks, that they have that the task isn't necessarily right for them, and that and perhaps it would be better covered by somebody else. So there's task, and leadership conflict is something that I think we've certainly been talking about, especially since we're in an organization that has co-chairs. Not only do we have co-chairs, but we have co-executive directors at PWN. And so the leadership conflict is when you have a couple leaders who just don't agree with each other, and what can we do about that? We can have them talk to each other. We can try to get through this. Hopefully there'll be somebody who's a trusted person that they can talk to, who can help to mediate whatever their differences happen to be. So it's really important to try to be on the same page as your co-chair. And work style conflict, we have Barb is ordering lunch, and she knows how to get Indian food to the group really fast, but I'm sorry, I want Italian. And so I would probably stick in there and say things like, but why don't we take a vote? But really what we need to be doing is taking care of getting lunch together. And so maybe that's something that we should have taken care of before, letting people know what we wanted. But we have work styles. Some people like to leave everything to the last minute, and that makes some other people really crazy. If you have a co-chair that is, if your co-chair and your other co-chair waits until the very last minute to either inform you of information or to, or you feel left out, then it's really important to talk to that person about it. And then of course there's personality conflict. And I have to say that on this one, I have been in groups for many, many years, and because I'm really, really old. And I have, I definitely see when I have a personality conflict, and I know for myself that the right thing to do is probably to step up and talk to that person about what our conflict is. and not make it be about our personalities, but about how we approach the tasks that we're trying to do. I'm thinking of one person, and I don't think we will ever be able to agree on all of the content together at the same time. I think this is a person who likes to be very involved, but also likes to be right all the time, regardless of how wrong. So that's one thing I've just had to accept, that there are going to be people that, and in some ways also really appreciate, because if there's somebody that, you know, we were talking a little bit before about, if you don't have people participating, then you're not going to hear the full range of what people have to say. If everybody's agreeing all the time, then you're not going to be challenged at all. So I know that being around this person has been one of those challenges that has been sent to me, and that I have to, when I listen to her and I look around the group, I have to see how many heads are nodding or how many people look like they don't understand what's being talked about, and remind myself that this person who I have this personality conflict with may be a lightning rod in the group. She may actually be pulling in some ideas that other people are thinking, but don't necessarily want to say anything. They may think that, oh, that's too far out there. I don't want people to think that I think this way about such and such. But when you have that lightning rod, it's really important, because you will find out who's agreeing with that person, and then you can try to find a way to settle that, so that there's some sort of consensus. So you have next slide. Okay, conflict management in groups. I love the way they're kind of standing across from each other, looking very, very conflicted. So stay calm, even though you may want to jump up and down and scream and use a string of expletives. That usually does not calm things down. That usually makes things worse. And then it's time to communicate and listen, to try to understand what the problems or issues are, because we may have conflict and not even have identified what the issues are. So sometimes people will come back to that point and say, oh, I didn't know that that's the way that you felt. Oh, actually, I agree with that. Or I don't agree with that because, and that can start dialogue. And actually acknowledging the conflict and being able to find a resolution. And this is another place where it might be important to involve a trusted mentor or a community leader to help to facilitate, and also be kind of an outsider and watch what's going on and be able to help you figure out maybe where you could make some changes. So, and this should be a community trusted member or mentor that whose opinion is generally respected. I don't think I would ask my most my biggest lightning rod, I'll put it that way, to try to monitor, to try to facilitate a conversation so that we're having better meeting. So next slide, please. And this brings us to some ways that we can measure group consensus. And this is a great slide that Barb has shared with me, and it's called Fist to 5. So first, your fist. Idea comes up, we're discussing this idea in a group meeting, and you absolutely hate the idea and you will not possibly agree with it, right? That's the fist. You're allowed to have a fist. You may, through more conversation, decide not to have that fist and maybe to move in a different direction. But it's important that people are able to say to illustrate what they're thinking. So, and I see one major, in caps, issue that we need to resolve. So the question then to ask that person is, what is that issue? And you're probably going to have several other people in the room who say, yeah, I was thinking about that too. 2 fingers. I see a minor issue that we need to resolve now. So before anything can be got, you can go on to see, to follow through on an idea. You need to figure out how to resolve the issue now before some people think it would be too late. 3 fingers, I see minor issues that we can resolve later. And so 3 finger, that's like, okay, we can fine tune this later on when we have a better idea of how this initiative is going to go, or what we can do some fine tuning. And that is a really flexible place. And 4, I'm fine with this as it is. And 5, oh my God, I love it. I will champion it. I will jump up and down, and I will try to get everybody else on board. So it's respecting each and every person's point of view and allowing them to have some range in what that point of view might be. So you have, oh, thanks, Barb. So you can, that fist may not stay a fist, or those 5 fingers might not stay 5 fingers. So it gives people an opportunity. If you're saying that you see an issue in the discussion, you need to bring that issue up. Not just, I see an issue and I don't know what it is, because it just doesn't feel right. Well, what doesn't feel right? And what could we do to, what steps could we take to make it more appropriate? So there's an opportunity here for everybody to be heard, and it gets you to a modified group consensus. Group consensus is when everybody can agree on the same thing. I think a modified group consensus is something that's much more manageable for me, at least, because it makes sure that everybody's opinion has been heard respectfully, and that with equal time on different points. So it does not give the person whose fist is closed the floor to go on forever, nor does it give the person with 5 fingers up who adores the idea the floor forever. We want to hear from those other people. What's going on? What minor thing or what major thing you're thinking about? What will we have to do in our plan to make this go better? So I think that's fist to 5 is the last one for me. But I really
sure
like
is.
this model because everybody can be heard this way. So thanks, Barb. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Any comment on how you can get to good meeting? I think that one of the important things to remember when we're doing meetings, and so as not to have that icky feeling about it not going well, is to really remember why you're there. And we're there to be there for each other, for ourselves and each other, and all the populations of people that we want to try to lift up. So we have lots of reason to be there. Now, if that doesn't work for individuals, maybe they need to not be in that group. Then maybe they need to reassess what their priorities are. But remember why you're at a meeting, and that it also is not a support group. We do a group that we do 90 minutes of group work, and then we allow ourselves 30 minutes of social time, so that we can do those social niceties like, how's this going? How's that going? Without trying to make it happen during the meeting itself. So anyway, just some ideas. Thanks.
That is great, Pat, and thank you. Yeah, people seem to be pretty enthusiastic about this as a tool, and so, yeah, thanks for your great explanation of it, because it's helpful. It's helpful, and it keeps the conversation going. That's the most important thing that you highlighted. So thank you. Next, we have Alicia, and Alicia's going to talk to us about communications within groups. And Alicia, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Alicia Diggs here, she, her, hers. Alicia in North Carolina. So glad that you all are here. This is some great information. Thank you, Pat. So communication within groups. It is so important to set clear goals within groups so that there's no room for misunderstandings. What you may understand, another person may understand that same thing differently. That can be avoided by having clarity. So we want to just make sure that we have clarity by giving room and space for communication. Everyone's voice needs to be heard. It is always a #1 rule to ensure that everyone's voice is heard. You're important, you are needed, and you matter. Within groups, we want to be sure that everyone has the opportunity to contribute. An idea or a comment may be the very thing that the sweet sauce in that conversation is needed. So making sure that everyone has the opportunity to contribute is so important. Avoiding making it personal. I know in the past, I have had so many opportunities where I've taken things personally and it had nothing to do with me. It's not always about you. It is not always about you. We have to learn to stop being so sensitive when it comes to things being said, topics being discussed, because again, it's not about you. When we avoid making things personal, we can avoid that negativity. We want to make sure that the negativity is avoided because it is a crucial part of keeping solidarity. We strive as a people to create solidarity and to keep solidarity. Yes, we all have different ideas. We all have different opinions. We have different outlooks and even different ways of doing things. But in taking the time to listen and respect others, that will give space for you to see things in another light. When you just take time, be still for a moment, say, you know what? I'm gonna just sit back and I'm gonna listen. You can see things in another light. A lot of us are set in our ways and we're used to doing things a certain way, hearing things a certain way. But again, if you just give space to see things in another light, other than the way that you've been accustomed to, then you can definitely avoid negativity. And avoiding negativity, you want to make sure you don't disrespect people. Don't throw out criticisms without suggesting alternatives. Listen more instead of listening less. Don't overtalk people. A lot of times we get into offense when we're in group settings and somebody's trying to explain something and then someone else may, they may have been rubbed the wrong way, or maybe something was said and they didn't agree with it. And instead of giving this speaker the time to finish their conversation, they get interrupted. And then that causes offense and that causes negativity in the space. And we want to avoid that by listening more instead of interrupting. And we definitely don't want to shut down people's ideas. And I mentioned taking things personal. I say that again because that's something that I've been in spaces, I've done it. I know many people can say, okay, I've done that, but we're a little bit more mature now and we definitely step away from that. Listen to understand instead of talking to be understood. Everyone wants to not just be heard, but we also want to be understood. That's a natural thing. It's really, really natural. Sometimes we're quick to be offended when someone says something that, like I said earlier, may rub us the wrong way. So we react before the person is able to even finish. In some spaces, though, to add a positive atmosphere and camaraderie, truly listen more than talking gives one the opportunity to understand what the speaker really means or the message that they're trying to get across. Now, years ago, I would hear this thing and I honestly thought it came from like grandmom, great grandmom, but it actually is a saying that came from a Greek philosopher, and I'm gonna say his name right, Epictetus. It's a Greek philosopher named Epictetus, and he said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. So I just want to let y'all marinate in that a little bit. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We listen twice as much as we speak. Next slide, please. And our group agreements. Group agreements are a clear set of guidelines on how your group will handle discussions, meetings, disagreements, and sensitive information. It's an important foundation and describes how your group will deal with misunderstandings and interpersonal conflict. A benefit of group agreements is that they give people a chance to express their own needs in a space that will empower them to fully participate and even feel safe. As I mentioned earlier, everyone's needs are different. So we should never assume, but we should always ask, giving people the opportunity to share what it is they need in that space that's going to, like I said, empower them and help them to be present in that moment and also feel safe, because it's things that can be said in a group setting that can be triggering, that can trigger, past traumas. So we need to be mindful of what is said and what is done, but the only way we can be mindful is to ask everyone and give them the opportunity to share what are those things that will allow me to be present in the moment and to feel safe in that space. And there's more information. I think I can share this in the chat. It's a good website that has some wonderful information on group agreements. And just a reminder of ours, and with PWN, and when we have meetings, we always have group agreements, and those group agreements help so much in the beginning to get those out. And you see them here. Speak from your personal experience and allow others to speak from theirs. Listen deeply, take space and make space. Have fun, but don't make fun. Honor your needs and boundaries along with those of our group. Confidentiality, that is so, so important. Confidentiality. People want to make sure and want to know that they're safe in that space and that their information, whatever they're discussing in that moment, stays in that space. Next slide, please. And I learned this through our wonderful group, calling in versus calling out. I know in the past, I was quick to say, no. And then I expressed however I felt about whatever was said. Calling out versus calling in. When we do, I'll just say it this way, there's a difference between the two. Calling in gives people the opportunity to explore deeper and to find a mutual understanding. You can seek to understand actually what somebody is trying to say. You can look for different points of view. You can also allow for reflections instead of reactions. Like, for example, somebody says something and maybe you don't understand, or, maybe they said something that, could have been stigmatizing. And you can ask them, I'm curious, what was your intention when you said that? Why do you think that was the case? Or why do you believe that to be true? And give them the opportunity to talk it out so that, you can help the entire group understand from their perspective. And then calling out, let someone know their words or actions are unacceptable, to interrupt or prevent further harm, difficult but necessary. Hit the pause button and stop momentum. With calling out, some examples are, wait a minute, ouch. I need to stop you right here. And that was me, in a meeting or in a situation with a group of friends. If something was said, it was like, wait a minute, even before the person finished saying whatever they had to say. If I was in disagreement with it, it was, wait, I don't understand. I don't like that. Or I wonder if you have considered the impact of your words. You know what you said? That was stigmatizing. You don't say it that way. Or, this is not our culture here. Those aren't our values. These aren't how we do things. This isn't the way things are supposed to be done. Or that's not the way things are supposed to be said. Instead of the calling out, the calling in is a much nicer way. And I'm sorry for my little notifications. It's a nicer way, a much calmer way, solidarity way to do things. if you call someone in, circle back, just circle back. If it's hurtful or oppressive, make sure you talk to them in private. If you call someone out, you can let them know your comment was hurtful in a public space, but definitely don't attack someone. But in a space where, you know, someone says something or does something that may have, you know, hurt you or hurt someone else, definitely call them out in that space. And there's some great information. I think that it was already shared. Yes, there's a great resource there. And it has a lot of wonderful information on calling out and calling in, just some examples that can help you in further conversations and further groups. And I would like to know from the audience or from you all here, you can put in the chat, you know, maybe take a few minutes to come off mute. What are some other techniques that maybe we can use in communication and groups? So you can put it in the chat. I don't know if anything's going on Facebook. Maybe people are commenting. Michelle?
For me, I have to take a breather and just leave the room and count to 10. And then think about how I want to possibly readdress before I verbalize. Because I'm a Taurus, and my first thought is to react. And so, like I said, I've come a long ways as to rethinking, but I still have to catch myself and just like hold that thought. And I say that a lot of times, hold that thought, I'll be right back. I'll be right back. And it's like, it's giving me a chance to, you know, put it somewhere, put that energy somewhere else and turn it into something else before I just explode. So like I said, that's for me. And so, I mean, I understand already what my strengths and my weaknesses are, and I can address that better because I already know that. So if you see me say, hold that thought, that's because I'm going to the opposite side of everybody. And just give me a minute, I'll be back.
I like that, Michelle. Thank you for sharing that. That is good. That counting to 10, I definitely have had to do that. I actually have a friend that when she's in that space and instead of reacting in that moment, she'll close her eyes. And because I know her, when she closes her eyes, I'm like, okay, she needs a moment. She needs a moment so that she does not react in that first, because that first thought is to just snap off. But you got to take that moment before that space becomes a negative space. Thank you for that.
Hi, this is Olga. Which I'm still catching myself is think about what I try to like, almost like what Michelle does, count a little bit or take a big deep breath and think of how I'm going to word what I'm about ready to say, because I have a good tendency not to think ahead of time what comes out of my mouth. What comes out of my mouth comes out faster than what I think it through. And I'm learning that, and I'm still fighting that with this group, from being with this group and being intentional what I have to say, what I want to say and how I say it. So yeah, just taking time to take a breather, big breather.
Thank you, Olga. Yeah, those taking a moment and breathing, that meditation is real. And you know, in a space when you feel like, you know, you getting ready to just react with your regular flesh, just take a moment, you know, take a moment to take that deep breath. Count. Sometimes you don't even have to get to 10. Sometimes it may just take 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just take a moment instead of expressing immediately in your flesh or your first reaction, because it'll change the trajectory of everything.
This
Anybody?
is Elder Antoinetta. How
Hey.
are you today? Hi. How you doing, sis?
Hey,
One
sis.
thing I always do is when I'm going into a meeting, since I've done so much conflict resolution, whether it be at the agency level or in the church, is prepare myself, know my audience. First of all, know what the situation is before I get there. And I also gonna know the personality of the individual or expected, unexpected from from the two different individuals that I'm either trying to assist. But the most important thing, and you said it before, is to sit and listen, because there's always three sides to a story. And not to bring any biases into the conversation that you may be feeling or may have. You need to leave that at the door so that you can deal with the individuals that you need to communicate with on a positive level. Today, a lot of people are tick, tick, boom. So we have to be very careful now how we interact with individuals and how we deal with conflict resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, my sister. I'm glad you said that. You know, with the times that we have been in and, you know, the way that the pandemic situation and so many other things have transformed our lives, people are on edge. A lot of people are on edge, and it's really going to take us being not just a bigger person, but also definitely taking a moment to step back, because you don't know where a person is in this present time. You really don't. You don't know if something that's triggering, or, you know, it could be that very last thing. Some people say you hit that button, and that one thing could be that button that got hit and set that person off. So, you know, it's best for us now, even more so in this time, to take a moment. And I love what you said, don't bring biases in the conversation. Leave all that junk at the door. Leave it outside the door, not even at the door. Don't even bring it into the space at all. Don't bring it with you. Wherever you are with your biases, leave it there. Don't even let that thing travel with you. I love that. Thank you. And I want to also add, for those who don't see the chat, Barb, I love that I do 3 before me, so I don't have to speak first. Miss Deidre.
Hey, oh goodness, I can't even get the words out today. Hey, y'all, hey. Hey, your voice. One thing that my dad taught me as a teenager, and it's something that I work very hard to do, is sometimes hearing what they're saying and not how they're saying it. Because we may lose the message if we are reacting to maybe their verbal, or not even verbal, but their tone of voice, their body language, etc. We might be losing that message because it's blurred, or behind that, I don't want to say smoke screen, but you see the visual before you hear the words. It's hard, and it may not work in every situation, but it has helped me to be more understanding of what people are saying, and not be so reactionary to what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah, that goes in line with the 2 ears and the 1 mouth. It truly does. Thank you all so much for your comments and your feedback. Anything else before I pass the mic on to the next queen? Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you, Pat. Thank you everyone for being here for this conversation. Like, I'm learning so much, and it's hitting a nerve. It's hitting close to home, because even just today, like when Barb asked me to be a part of this, I wasn't going through any particular conflict, but then today I got an email. So it wasn't necessarily a group setting in person, but I got an email it's going to impact the group, because I have to decide on how to handle my response. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, about how we show up as our best selves. Whenever I'm uncomfortable in like these group settings where I know conflict may be present, or I know that maybe I'm not as informed about the dynamics of the group, and I'm coming in and trying to figure things out, I usually just I ask questions. Anybody who's been in a meeting with me, I'm always stopping to ask questions for clarity. And it's just, usually it's this, it's coming from a place of like, how can I learn from this? How will my response, or action impact others, and how can I contribute? So there's space for clarity for others, like people who may come in after me. If I already asked the question, then they don't have to worry about, things not making sense. So, how do we participate in groups? And I think Barb raised this at the beginning, that can be here at PWN, it can be our own families, it can be our church, as Elder Antonetta said, it can be within our schools, it can be anywhere. I suggest in some ways to try to take, and I feel like a lot of us have done this, I've heard y'all say it, to try to take an assessment to understand a couple of things, like what is your intended individual outcome for participating in the group? And then what is the collective outcome or purpose of the group that's been predetermined through the group agreements, through whatever's on the agenda? And then how do those two things align? How does what you're going to bring into that space align with the collective group? So that's your common goal and purpose. And then how can you offer skills and strengths in that space? And do you know what your skills and strengths are? And I think I'm glad that there was the leadership webinar that showed your different leadership styles, which helps you identify those different things. And then how can you leverage your limits and weaknesses and understanding your skills to bring support and resources that can better equip you in that group setting? And then, in my opinion, another way to like whittle down this understanding of how to be your best self and align with your common goals is being present and eliminating distractions. And whether that's in your physical environment or your virtual environment or your emotional environment, like eliminating those things that will block you from being able to show up. So do you need to hydrate? Do you need to drink some water? Do you need to fix some tea because your throat's itching? Do you need to stretch because you've been hunched over at your computer all day and the nerves in your neck are starting to burn? And that can add to tension. The tension in your body adds to the tension in how you show up in group spaces. Do you need to eat? Have you gone back to back in meetings and didn't stop to eat? Do you need to breathe? And I paused on purpose. Like, do you need to just breathe? You've been back to back on calls. You've been picking up kids from wherever. You had to go run and grab a package. You had to go get the registration change for your car and then get back home before another meeting started. Did you breathe? And I think that's one of the biggest things we take for granted. Like, of course I breathe. I'm still sitting here. Like, no, like intentional, like deep breath in, hold for a count of 3 to 4, 7 if you really need it. And then, let it out really slow, and you'll be amazed at the difference that makes. Do what you need to be present. It can be any of those things. It can be twerking in between calls. I'm good for put on some music and just doing whatever you need to do to shake off your energy so that you can show up as your best self. Olga, get it. Olga's always dancing. I love it. I believe also acknowledging that what you may not find to be distracting might be distracting for others. So for some people in group settings, sitting a certain way or moving or pacing might help you be focused, but then it also might be really distracting for someone else. And I'm not saying don't center yourself, but be mindful of what you're doing. That could be a useful tool that might jar someone else. So try to find a way to maybe do it in a way where you're not blocking from the presentation or the main discussion that's happening. And I feel that once you do these things, you're better equipped to hear new ideas and brainstorm and think through on the collective purpose of your group. And there in your group setting, there can be a lot of time and energy going into strategizing and a lot of documentation or a lot of mobilizing, and you don't want to get lost in the work. You want to take time to celebrate. So your wins, and there's no win that's too big or too small. So if your group set a deadline to have a document in 2 weeks and you got it done in a week, celebrate that. If you got it done on the day instead of having to ask for an extension, celebrate that. Did you get an increase in participation on your calls where only 14 people registered, but 50 showed up? Celebrate that. Celebrate all your wins. I know a win for me is when everyone responds to a doodle poll. I'm like so excited. I'm like, yes, I get to actually schedule a meeting that everyone's available for and hope that no one backs out. But just a reminder that all those things can be victories. And in those moments of celebration, it's okay to provide, the critical and honest feedback that you need. Like, okay, we accomplished this. Here's how we can do it better next time. Like, we got this document done, but we really didn't have anybody to edit it. Or we got the meeting scheduled, but we forgot to make the Zoom a webinar instead of a meeting. Like that, those types of things are honest and helpful feedback that also you don't have to personalize or internalize. And you just remember in your group, you should have an alignment in your goal and your group agreements, and you want to strive to be better. And to not, like I said, to not make it personal, and make sure that there's offerings of support and resources and tools, and to honor the diversity of the group and what the different things are that people can bring to the table. Next slide. So I love this slide. I love this image that Barb put in. Self-management. And really, this picture tells me trust. Like, self-management isn't just about trusting the group, it's also about trusting yourself and your abilities and having confidence in that. And that wasn't even part of what I was going to say, but I just really that just spoke to me, that resonated. Last time I checked, we're human, we're all human, and we have our limitations. And we are all powerful and amazing subject matter experts that have diverse needs to be our best selves. And it's critical when in these power building spaces and moments that we take the inventory to check and see, how are we doing? How are we feeling? Acknowledge your emotions. Like, so-and-so got on my nerves before I had to come into this meeting. Let me, like Michelle said, let me count to 10, take a deep breath. Let me breathe. Let me drink some water. Let me leave that there, leave that outside the meeting. I can pick it back up when I leave. Or maybe you'll get something in a meeting where you won't have to pick that thing back up. You never know. But take an inventory and evaluate your capacity to contribute honestly. Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling distracted? Be honest about those things with yourself, and state with intention with your group that you may not be operating at 100%. The truth of the matter is that no one really knows what your 100% looks like except you. And you can be giving 40% on a consistent daily basis. Nobody knows that that's not your 100 except you. So I know we beat ourselves up a lot, like, oh, I'm not, and I'm literally speaking about myself. Like, I'm using I statements, but I'm talking to you all as an example. And a few of you on this call know that I beat myself up a lot. But that remembering the 100% really, really helps me be honest about how I'm showing up. Life moments can call for you to center yourself and prioritize personal issues. There can be like maintenance workers, making all kinds of noise in your apartment building. You can have distracting texts from coworkers or family. Your pet might be getting sick. I literally was on 2 calls last week and everyone's dog kept getting sick. And I was like, what in the world is happening? And those things can be taxing because you want to be present. You want to be a part of the solution energy that's happening, but you also have these things that might be pulling you away. Give yourself permission to take that break. To be like, you know what, I need, like, give me 30 minutes. Can we reschedule? Can I connect with you on email? Can we connect on text? Can I just follow up at another time? Like, don't beat yourself up about needing that grace. All of this in some way requires honesty and trust, trusting of yourself and trusting of your group to be able to hold that whenever you do make that ask. And it helps keep you grounded, because you can take a step back and breathe and then come back and be like, okay, I was given that grace, and now I've reset, I've recalibrated, and I can be my best self. Sorry, trying to read through my notes. Be mindful of what you've committed to. And one way I do that is ask myself, why am I here? Especially when I'm in meetings that are like recurring, they're monthly, and it's a long-term project, I'll ask myself, why am I still here? And I think Pat said this earlier, and it made me so happy to hear you say it, but remember your why. That helps ground me. Like, why am I here? And be careful about how you like emphasize the words in that question. Instead of like, why am I here? It can be more like, no, why am I here? And that, for me, that helps me tap into like remembering my purpose, remembering what inspired me to show up for PWN, remembering what inspired me to sign up for the AIDS Watch Legislative Hill meeting. And I'm just like, why am I sitting here talking to this person? I think about the bigger picture. So be committed to like do that inventory and take an assessment. And it also helps you be accountable to the group, and remember to think outside of self. When you combine these things together, you're making it a team effort. You're shifting to split the labor if you can. A lot of this work, I'm sure you all know, is like emotional labor. And we can't do it alone. We need to be able to lean on and hold on to one another. And I've seen this meme on Instagram a few times that says, it's something about, you hear people say, I hit a wall. And sometimes that sounds like, oh, I've slammed into a wall and I can't go any further. But if you reframe that narrative and say, maybe the wall is there for you, just lean on and just take a minute. I'm all about reframing negativity to help me function. So especially the past 2 years, because it's been wild out in these internet streets, y'all. This world is crazy. Next slide, please. Support for others. I think this is so helpful in navigating potential conflict in groups as well as present conflict. And having a facilitator, a mediator, a space holder, a gap leader, whatever you want to call that space, is really, really important. And I think going into group meetings, having someone that's designated to facilitate and commit to checking in with the group and keeping everyone on agenda and monitoring what's happening and doing, pulse checks or whatever you want to call those is really, really critical. And I think it's important that whoever is identified as like the leader of this meeting to work with the person who's facilitating. And if that ends up being one and the same person, I encourage you to try to find support so you can co-facilitate. But try to identify beforehand the agenda and the presentation materials and be consistent in your preparation if it's a recurring meeting. So if something comes up that you need to have to shift gears, you can do so without like, oh my God, the Zoom turned off. Like, you can be more like, you know what? Sorry, folks, we're having some technical difficulties. We're going to follow up and post the information to our Facebook page, or we'll post later, or we'll catch you at our 7 o'clock meeting. Be prepared for those things, and being able to communicate with a facilitator will help you do that with some ease and some comfort and some grace. And all of this, is about operating with intention and being mindful of what's it going to take for you to get to the outcome of whatever your group that's put together is striving for. So be mindful of who else is available to support, and then be willing to share the facilitation. So if you have a co-facilitator that maybe one takes lead and runs the whole meeting that day, and then the next meeting you switch. Or if there's 3 or 4 people, you just rotate it out. so folks know that they don't have to take on the whole load by themselves. And from the very beginning, you want to be sure to include and incorporate all voices from every decision aspect. So for example, the facilitator shouldn't be the only one drafting the agenda. The facilitator shouldn't be the only one that's putting the bullet points. There should be an ask. Like, I mean, you can craft it in the Google Doc or in wherever, and then put it out to the group like, hey, does anyone want to add anything to the agenda? Or is there anything on the agenda that folks want to shift around that may not be a priority? You want to make sure all voices are included. And you want to give space for people who operate with different skill sets. Sorry, I was also trying to read the chat, but maybe I shouldn't be doing that. So, and then also having a facilitator helps keep things like smooth flowing. If there's interruptions because folks get excited about what's being discussed, or because they're ramped up about the brainstorming and the brainstorming just keeps going because folks are inspired, or there's conflict and folks want to unpack and get stuff off their chests because maybe folks didn't stop to breathe or eat or hydrate or whatever, the facilitator can function in a space that kind of helps people take an intentional pause. And maybe in the group agreements that can be added, like what's our kind of code word for getting us back on track. And I remember I had a teacher in 4th or 5th grade, when the class would get rambunctious, she never yelled. She didn't do anything like abrasive or aggressive. She would just get quiet and stand there and look. And we would be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And sometimes, we look at her like, is she okay? But then we realize like, oh, she's just trying to get our attention. And that works for some folks. And some folks will completely ignore you and just keep doing what they're doing. So then you have to find another way to keep folks on track, to stay on topic. Another way is you can flag how much time is left. I love when people do this in meetings because I'm good for getting into my brainstorming mode. And so for a facilitator to be like, well, Kamari, that's really great. We have about 10 minutes left of the meeting. And then that's like the nicest way to tell me to shut up. And then I look at the agenda and I'm like, oh, my bad. I'll follow up with the email. So I appreciate that. That's another way. You can flag that someone still has the floor. Like you might have interrupted them because you got excited and they didn't say anything. But you can say, well, Olga was still talking. So let's let Olga finish her thought. And then we're going to go to the next agenda item, sorry. These types of, strategies can help your meeting from getting too complicated, and it helps you to shift to collectively agreeing to how to operate. And then if you do get to the end of your meeting and realize like y'all are over time, but you really just want to keep going, don't just force people to stay there. Don't hold people hostage. Take a pause and ask for a consensus. Like, Pat's model with the fist of 5. I think that's lovely. Get a consensus of like, hey, do folks have another 15 minutes to talk through this and kind of land this topic so we can be clear about our next steps. Doing all of this can help your meetings run smoothly to a point. Because remember, we are human, but it does help you be more inclusive and be mindful of all the different personalities and skill sets that are in the space. But also keep in mind, like, we're operating in a technical world. So even just the building of like a Zoom meeting, like making sure folks know how to navigate, how to mute themselves, how to turn their camera on, how to utilize the chat and the reactions, making sure folks know how to do that or at least have access to it will also help people feel included. It might be their very first time in the meeting. They may not want to say a word, but they can read the chat or they can see people's facial expressions because they know how to use their camera. Making sure that all of that is in place contributes to folks feeling utilized, not utilized, but appreciated. And if you don't put this intention in, it can cause folks to not feel like they're included. And I love that Barb opened the meeting with asking, how does a group that works makes you feel? So if you're going to meetings and you step back and realize you're not feeling that great about it, it's probably because some of these things aren't in place. And as a group member, you can suggest them. You don't have to just assume that the facilitator is going to know it all. I will admit, from a facilitator standpoint, I often get stuck in my head of just getting the workout that I forget to do group agreements, or I forget to do a proper agenda, and I'll just steamroll right into that meeting. And then I pause and realize everybody's just staring at me because nobody feels, they're just waiting for me to dump the information, because I just rolled up in there and started talking. And so like, oh, okay, it's not meant for us to say anything. We'll just sit here and listen. And I I think that it's important for folks to feel like you can check your facilitator too. But yeah, I don't know if I have another slide, but I know that there's a link that has resources from Hive Learning for you all to utilize as reference for in the various groups that you operate in. And then I guess a question I would like to ask folks to come off mute, or write in the chat, whatever you have access to, like, what do you gain by working well in a group? And how do you see this versus working alone? Sometimes I think back to when I was a child and would be assigned to work in groups, and I would start sweating because I'm just like, I'm going to end up being the one doing all the work. And there was like a weird validation in that for me. Like I became like conditioned to it, to where when I became an adult, I was like, I like it now. I didn't like working in groups, but I've learned I like working in groups where I feel supported, where I'm pushed, where I'm challenged, and not where I feel like I'm having to pull the weight. So I don't want to drop all the answers. I want to hear from you all on what do we gain by working well in groups.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes. Yes. And Barb, that stream analogy you gave, yeah, the whoosh, you're really going to make us do that, aren't you?
To your answer, Kamari, I would have to say you gain leadership too, especially if you have been in groups where maybe somebody has taken the majority of the work, and this time you're in a group and everybody is taking equal parts, and it really and it's like, wow, this time I have the opportunity, as you said, to be challenged. So it gives you a sense of leadership to be able to put your best foot forward, and to really put your best foot forward, period. Because I'm like you, I've never really liked the group work at all. I'm always the one having to do the footwork and the communication. But I will say I have a team that I worked with when we did our virtual tour. My team is thebomb.com. And it was the first time ever in all of my years of being in group work that I enjoyed group. My group was the bomb. Like, it just made me feel really good, appreciated. We had each other's back. Nobody on the outside knew where there were hiccups at all. Everything ran smoothly, but it was wonderful. So yeah, it just makes you feel good.
It does. It does. And when we're doing it by ourselves, like, you burn yourself out, you get frustrated, you don't have folks to tap. Well, you do, you probably have folks to tap into, you just choose not to. And I've learned, I think it's different. Community versus groups for me is different. This is community, and it's easier to rely on and trust folks in my community than folks I don't know, or they don't know the issue, or they don't know me that I get assigned to. So anyone else?
What I get out of working in groups, I'd learn, and others might learn, their strengths that they didn't think they had. The other group members would push them out of your comfort zone, so you could realize what you really might be capable of, or what you might be better at doing than what you thought. And you might like that position better. So it's just pushing you out of your comfort. Other people just, talking to, supporting you and helping you realize your leadership styles, what you're good at, what your strengths are. And then when things get accomplished, it's like, oh my God, you don't even want to take the credit for the work. You want the group to take the credit for it. You know, it's just like, well, yeah, you take the credit, but you make sure the whole group's in there as the credit. My group that I belong to, it did this, and you do it that like with the dancing and everything.
Right, Olga, because it's the we did this together.
Yep.
And that is the best statement of all. So Kamari, I can go ahead because we got two more hands that are raised. So we'll go with Lisa and then Michelle. If there's anyone else who wants to raise your hand, go ahead and do so. So Lisa, why don't you go ahead and share with us what we gain by working well in groups?
You're on mute, Lisa.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I learned by working well in a group is that there's no job that is, I want to say, more important than the other job. That everyone has their function. Whether you're doing something that is menial or or not. I mean, it's they're all important, and that whatever level you're working on, you should always be doing your best because as a team, you want to excel. And I guess the other thing that I learned by working well as a team is that what was I trying to say? I think that a team, when you work together as a team, one, it's important to be able to do your job, but as a leader, I think that it's important that one of the things I think it makes a person a good leader is the ability to delegate. Because no matter how good you are, I don't think that you can be as good as a team if you're taking over every responsibility. So I think that one of the most important things is like to be able to delegate. I think that people that that I've known, like when I started doing construction, I had a guy who was I was apprenticing, and he was my boss. And one of the things that he did, he never ever blamed anything on me. Every mistake that I made, we made it, and things that I thought were impossible, he never said, you're dumb, you can't do it, blah, blah, blah. He would just show me how to do it. And that was how I realized that, that even things that seem insurmountable, there's always a solution if you work hard enough. So he taught me a lot about being part of a team and being responsible. What my responsibility is as a leader. Because I can't, if something goes wrong in my team, I can't say you did it, because my boss don't want to hear they did it. You know what I'm saying? So those are things that I learned.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Those are great examples about how teams really work. And part of what we talked about with the accountability is that if you commit to doing something and you can't do it, life happens. But let people know so that people can come in and help you, or can take over part of it, or all of that. That's about this kind of conversation as well. So thank you, Lisa. Michelle, you had you're our last comment for tonight.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to say that what you just said was what I was going to hit on about if you can't or not sure about how something goes, just let somebody else know so they can assist you with it and maybe help you with a little bit more of the training so that you will know. Because what I struggle with really hard is technology and spreadsheets. Those are not my strengths, at all. Technology and spreadsheets, they just make me want to just throw my computer through the wall, so I'm constantly trying to, even though I might see something that says, okay, this is how you do it, And you know, you can always go in and Google says something about how you do a spreadsheet. That ain't got nothing to do with my spreadsheet. That's how they wanted me to see it, you know. So I'm constantly trying to work on all of the little things to tweak what's going to make me better. And yes, I do rely on other people, but I don't expect a 24 or a 48-hour response because I know everybody is busy. But I don't get bent out of shape when they don't call me right back. I used to, because like, did nobody call me back? Did nobody call me back? But I had to learn that everybody is as busy as everybody else, and it may take them 2 or 3 days. You just got to, you just got to breathe, like you say, and because they have a life and they have things to do, and they're gonna get back with you when they can. But it's not that they don't care; they just have just as much on their plate as you do.
That is a great point, Michelle, and thank you. That is a great way to go ahead and conclude our webinar tonight. So our next steps are that we have our racial justice webinar coming up, and actually I think it's going to be just on racial justice on December 15th, and Vanita is going to be leading that presentation. One of our other next steps is to go ahead and talk with your chapter or other groups about dynamics that are working or not working. Probably by Friday, we'll go ahead and we'll share the recording as well as the slides with you. So you'll have these tools at your fingertips so you can go back and refer to them and can really kind of think about what works, what groups do you want to be in, and what groups do you not feel that you want to be a part of, what that make you feel icky. Because, you know, as we learn these skills in all of the groups that we're in, including our family, we can become more proficient at using them, and that helps us with our chapter work. It helps us when we have our in-person activities. It helps us all around on our national membership calls. So with that, I want to just go ahead and here's our contact information. I want to thank Alicia, Pat, and Kamaria for coming on and sharing really powerful both personal examples and also just helping walk us through. So many of these things can be really hard for us to talk about. So just really grateful and thank you so much for bringing this this information in a way that feels interesting and not at all shaming or embarrassing, because as we learn together, we are able to develop ourselves. And once again, a final reminder, please, please, please take the evaluation. I'm gonna go ahead and put the link in one last time. It is how we know what we can go ahead and improve with our webinars or what we need to change, what might be interesting to have next time. And then we have our resources. Those were in the links, but we'll go ahead and you'll be able to get access to those when you can see the slides. So with that, want to just thank everybody and appreciate everybody for being on. I know we went a lot over, which is not actually quite so good when you're talking about group dynamics. But we wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to, I know, do as I say, not as I'm showing. Absolutely. But we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to share, because that's what's so important, is that we're elevating each and every one of us as leaders who have something to share and to add. So with that, Pat and Alicia, if you have any last thoughts, feel free to come off of mute and share them. Otherwise, yeah, I'll check and see Pat.
My survey link isn't working. I keep getting page broken error messages. Is anyone else's working?
Mine is working.
I can't get it. I keep getting that.
Okay. Well, we'll send it out. It'll also be in the email that comes out with the link to the video as well as the slides. And so if you we'll go ahead. And that actually was that Lisa? Okay, Lisa, I've got your email. I'll go ahead and just send it to you directly, all right?
No, this was Mary Johnson.
Mary Johnson, okay, sorry. You're all jumping all around in my little gallery view there. So Mary Johnson, I'll go ahead and send it to you. And with that, I want to just go ahead and see if Alicia, do you have anything that you want to add, hon?
Just know that you are important, you are needed, and hug yourself and have sweet sleep tonight.
Yes.
And
I just want to say
anything.
Can you also send it to Tammy Ross?
Everybody will go ahead and get it. So Pat.
I
some
just want to
final
thank
thoughts?
everybody. I think that this was just an example of good meeting. And
Excellent.
yeah, so I think that we did a great job, and I want to thank everybody for being here today. This was fun, not icky at all.
Not icky at all. So with that, go forth, have good meeting, and if it's icky, start thinking about how you can change, and feel free to reach out to us. And with that, we'll go ahead and end our meeting, and thank everybody for joining us. Have a good evening and take care.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
Bye all.
Good night.